No one should have to stare at barcodes, worrying, "I wonder if the price has gone up again today," just to get bread home. But that harsh spring of 1973 was exactly what millions of Americans were experiencing. Imagine waking up one morning, going to the grocery store and finding that yesterday's 89 cents worth of meat had gone up to 150 today without warning. That look of astonishment on people's faces, the silence that stretched behind the butchers, that silence was the first sign of a great storm to come. This wasn't just a price hike. This was the first major consumer revolt in a country that had ever tested people's patience. And the real pain was this: Americans had been accustomed to the ups and downs of the economy for years, but this was the first time they felt the pot in their kitchen was under threat. Meat was at the center of American family tables, the meatballs on the kids' plates, the Sunday family barbecue, the meatball casserole for dinner. So it wasn't just about money. It was about the shattering of a culture where people felt safe. This wasn't just a price hike. This was the first major consumer revolt in a country that had ever tested people's patience. And the truly tragic part was this: Americans had been accustomed to the ups and downs of the economy for years, but this was the first time they felt the pot in their kitchen was under threat. Meat was at the center of American family tables, the meatloaf on the kids' plates, the Sunday family barbecue, the meatball casserole for dinner. So it wasn't just about money, it was about the shattering of a culture where people felt safe. But no one yet knew the full truth. Was this price increase truly a matter of supply and demand, or were there more powerful hands behind the scenes? While these questions lingered, a movement led by women exploded across America, the meat boycott. And the genesis of this movement was, in fact, the outpouring of anger from the country's seething silence. Crowds gathering in front of butcher shops, mothers declaring, "Enough!" families throwing away their shopping lists. This wave sweeping across the country was so powerful that it even dazzled Washington. The press, television channels, newspapers, everyone was fixated on a single question: what is the real reason for this increase? This is where tensions were rising, because nothing announced satisfied people. Production costs have increased, they said. It's a seasonality, they said. A sudden change in demand, they said. No, nobody believed them. And worst of all, as the announcements increased, so did the suspicion. Whispers were circulating about what was happening behind the scenes. Some blamed big corporations, some blamed politicians' poor decisions. Some believed there was a much deeper economic manipulation at play. When so many people in a country are simultaneously angry, there must be something hidden, and now people were determined to solve this mystery. But things didn't end there. On the contrary, as the movement grew, tensions would escalate further. To understand the economic turmoil America experienced during those years, it was necessary to understand why this boycott suddenly grew. This was not simply a consumer reaction, but the cry of the country's elite. And this outcry dragged the country to such a point that no one could have predicted that it would one day enter textbooks as one of the most dramatic examples of consumer power. But the truly surprising detail hadn't yet emerged. That detail would explain why people actually took to the streets. In the spring of 1973, the same scene played out in many American cities. Women standing in front of supermarket butcher aisles would stare at the price tags, then slowly turn away their shopping carts. Even the butchers knew what that look meant. It was a look that said, "This isn't going to happen." He had a family to support, and keeping the kitchen running at these prices seemed impossible. And it was at this very moment, from a completely unexpected point in history, that a spark struck. Housewives took center stage. At that time, politics, economics, protest, these were all considered the domain of men, but it was often the mother who managed the family budget. She was in charge of the kitchen. It was in her hands to keep the pot boiling. So when meat prices rose, the first and greatest wave of anger came from women. This anger began quietly, with a few whispers at the grocery store exit. "I'm not buying meat at these prices anymore. Let's boycott it for a week. Even milk prices have gone up. Enough is enough." Within a few days, these whispers became a slogan that spread across a continent. "Don't buy meat this week. "Don't buy meat this week." No one had appointed a leader. No one had formed an organization. But when thousands of women thought the same thing, a massive movement was born. When mothers preparing dinner at home sat down at the kitchen table and calculated, the situation became crystal clear. If I buy meat, I won't be able to pay the electricity bill. This was a deeply human fear that everyone could experience. So suddenly, the boycott wasn't just an economic response. It became a fight for survival. For the first 3 days of the boycott, the national press downplayed the issue. "Women's anger is short-lived," they said. "They can't last a week. It's a futile gesture." Some newspapers even tried to portray it as a fashion trend. But both the authorities and the media overlooked a crucial detail. The target of this anger wasn't prices, but injustice. Because people were now asking, why has meat become so expensive? Is there really a shortage? Or is this the profiteering of a few large corporations? Or is it an economic wave the government can't control? And as these questions multiplied, the boycott grew stronger. In some cities, the boycott grew so widespread that even when butchers found meat to put on the shelves, no one would even look at them. Sales plummeted dramatically. Many butchers began reporting to newspapers, "No customers came today." This was a wake-up call for the country. In a place like America, where consumption drives the economy, the public was pounding the table. The government was beginning to panic. Meetings dragged on. Some said, if this movement doesn't stop, prices will rise even further. Others claimed the public is fueling the crisis. A completely different debate was brewing in the press. Is there really no meat, or is it being made out to be? As doubts grew in people's minds, so did the fervor of the movement. And at that very moment, something unexpected happened. Some large supermarket chains, unable to withstand the pressure any longer, began to cut prices. This was the first concrete proof that the boycott was working. But the interesting part was that the boycott's impact began to affect not only supermarket shelves, but also the psychological makeup of society. For the first time, people felt the sense of "we are strong when we are united." Housewives, for the first time in their lives, realized that they possessed the power to influence the economic order. But behind this seemingly small victory, a dark truth still lingered. Why had prices actually risen? Was the real reason being concealed, or was all this chaos a sign of a larger economic collapse? As the boycott spread nationwide, meat aisles suddenly became symbols. They were no longer just grocery items, they were a mirror of economic distortion, an invisible order, and a fragile era. This wave, initiated by housewives, revived a profound question that had settled deep within America. Was there really a famine, or was it created? In those years, everyone walking the streets of old America felt the weight of this problem. For meat wasn't just a food, it was a blessing on the table, a symbol of family warmth, a fundamental part of a culture that declared dinner is ready. When prices rose, people weren't just losing meat, they were also losing their sense of security. During this period, strange news stories began to appear in newspapers. Some major producers were accused of holding tons of meat in their warehouses. Some believed this was a commercial tactic to reduce supply and raise prices. It was a natural consequence of the market being shaped by profit, but it was impossible to explain this to the public in this way, because it was an injustice that triggered people's deepest emotions. Meanwhile, another reality was slowly emerging. The wave of inflation that began toward the end of the 1960s had become uncontrollable by 1973. Money was being earned the same way, but it was becoming less valuable each month. Everything was rising, and wages were stagnating. Meat prices were the most visible manifestation of this increase in the food sector. Because a single serving on the table represented a major economic problem, and at this point, another unexpected development occurred. Many butcher and market employees began issuing repeated statements. "We don't want these prices either. We can't even look people in the eye either. At this rate, there won't be any customers left." Because the hardest hit by the boycott weren't the large corporations that set prices, but the neighborhood butchers. In those warm, familiar neighborhoods of the old America, butchers were among the most trusted businesses. People had shopped with them for years, even knowing their children's names. Now, those same people were turning away without even approaching the butcher's counter. This breaking point further intensified the emotional toll of the boycott. As the protest grew, the bond between the public and the small business owners thinned, but people still refused to back down, because the issue was no longer about the butcher or the grocery store. It was about the injustice of the economic order. As the boycott continued apace, whispers began to circulate among sources close to the government. Some officials claimed that the rising prices were related to international turmoil, supply problems, and a sudden increase in production costs. But the public found these explanations unconvincing. The problems America faced in those years weren't just about numbers. The high costs of the Vietnam War, the devaluation of the dollar, the rise in the national debt, and rising oil prices, it all came together, becoming too much for the economy to bear. The apparent cause was meat prices, but the deeper cause was much greater. The economy was exhausted, the system was gasping for air, and the people were feeling this exhaustion at their own tables. But what was truly striking was this. As the boycott progressed, even though prices began to fall, the sense of insecurity that once arose in society persisted. During this period, many families began instilling savings habits in their children for the first time. Grocery shopping was done more meticulously, meal plans were prepared more carefully, and cheap days were observed throughout the week. The old American middle class saw the fragility of the economy so clearly for the first time, and it was in this atmosphere that something else became clear. The boycott had become more than just a protest. It was an awakening. The culture of questioning prices had spread so widely for the first time. But behind all this, there remained a darker picture. A question that remained unanswered. Why had meat prices actually risen? Was the outward appearance the same as the reality behind the scenes? A consumer uprising that lasted just 7 days had brought America's giant food companies to their knees. But no one knew that this boycott wasn't actually an economic warning, but a social outcry, and that's where things started to change. Women still didn't go to the butcher, and men didn't even pass the meat aisle at the supermarket. Many families had gotten used to putting cheaper options in the pot for the first time in months. Pasta, chicken, beans. A habit was forming. But the truly shocking thing was that people weren't just unwilling to reduce their meat intake, they were actually wanting to. This was a change that would be difficult to reverse, even if prices were lowered. So what happened? The boycott, which evolved from a simple protest, triggered the psychological aspect of economic behavior. For the first time, people experienced the powerful feeling, if I'm not buying, the system isn't working, and the first institution to recognize its impact was the government. On the 5th day of the week, officials held emergency meetings. The causes of the rising meat prices were analyzed: feed costs, transportation costs, inflation, farming policies. It was all complex, but one thing was simple: consumer behavior directly impacted production, and that's when everything changed. The government implemented temporary regulations to curb price increases and regain control. The press described this as people power, but behind the scenes there was a deeper panic. What if tomorrow people boycott milk, bread, and sugar too? This thought chilled the blood of companies and executives. On the last day of the boycott, a strange silence reigned in the supermarkets. No one even touched the high-priced products. Butchers looked at each other behind the counters, whispering, "Is this really over?" Some thought they might go bankrupt, but the same fear was growing inside them all. What if this is permanent? This is where a new rift emerged. Because at that time, people were beginning to develop an awareness, not just of meat prices, but of the overall cost of living. The boycott had unleashed a social energy that could have a domino effect. This energy was so powerful that it would even influence many economic decisions in America. So what was the outcome? Meat prices plummeted quickly, but the boycott's true impact went far beyond that. The 1973 meat boycott has been considered the modern beginning of consumer movements, according to historians. For the first time, when people acted together, they saw a massive industry brought to its knees. But the most pressing question always lingered. If this boycott had lasted another week, how much more would the economy have been shaken? And this is the question that has haunted economists for years. Because, according to some experts, any continuation of that week could have plunged America not just into a food crisis, but into a very different economic era. But that week that didn't continue remains a mystery. Thanks for listening. See you in the next video.